Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Byron Shelton adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of his downtown Chicago penthouse, watching the morning sun paint the skyline in golden hues. At 34, he had everything most men dreamed of: a successful tech consulting firm, a seven-figure portfolio, and in 3 days, he'd marry the woman he believed was his soulmate. Kara Ewing had entered his life 8 months ago like a whirlwind of perfection. Auburn hair that caught light like fire, emerald eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul, and a laugh that could make him forget his worst days. She was a freelance graphic designer, she'd told him, working with small businesses while building her own brand. Independent, creative, beautiful. Everything he'd never found in the corporate circles he usually moved in. Their relationship had been a carefully orchestrated dance. Kara never seemed too eager, never pushed for commitment, never asked about his money. She split dinner bills, insisted on taking separate cars to events, and when he'd proposed after 6 months, she'd actually hesitated. "Are you sure, Byron? Marriage is such a big step," she'd said, tears in her eyes. It had only made him love her more. Now, as he headed to his office, Byron's phone buzzed with a text from his soon-to-be father-in-law, Raymond Archer. "Looking forward to Saturday, son. Kara's lucky to have found someone like you." Raymond was a retired police detective turned private investigator, a man whose approval Byron had worked hard to earn. The fact that an experienced cop vouched for him meant everything. Byron had met few of Kara's friends. She was selective, she explained, preferring quality over quantity. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 22, she'd told him tearfully one night. No siblings, just a grandmother in Florida they'd visit after the honeymoon. It had made Byron protective of her, this beautiful woman who'd faced so much loss yet remained so strong. At his office, Byron's assistant Corey Bailey knocked and entered. The wedding planner called. "Everything's confirmed for Saturday." "Oh, and your accountant wants to review the prenup again before you sign." Byron waved him off. The prenup's fine as is. He'd insisted on keeping it simple. What was his stayed his, what was hers stayed hers, and anything acquired together would be split 50-50. Kara had been almost insulted by the suggestion initially. "I don't want your money, Byron. I want you," she'd said. Another reason he adored her. That evening, Byron picked up Kara from her modest apartment in Lincoln Park. She greeted him at the door in a sundress that made his breath catch, but something seemed off. Her usual confident smile wavered slightly, and her hands trembled as she locked the door. "Everything okay, beautiful?" he asked, pulling her close. "Wedding nerves, I guess." She laughed, but it sounded forced. 3 days feels like forever and no time at all. They drove to dinner at Alinea, where Byron had proposed. The same corner table, the same view of the city lights. But Kara barely touched her food, constantly checking her phone. "Work emergency?" Byron asked. "Just a difficult client. You know how it is." She reached across, squeezing his hand. "I'm sorry. I'm here, completely here." But she wasn't, and Byron noticed everything. The way her eyes darted to other diners when they laughed too loud. The slight flinch when the waiter approached from behind. The fact that she ordered wine but barely sipped it. Unusual for someone who'd introduced him to her favorite vintage just last month. Walking back to his car, Byron's mind wandered to their first meeting at a coffee shop in River North. He'd been there for a business meeting that got canceled, working on his laptop when she'd approached his table. "Excuse me, is the seat taken?" She gestured to the chair across from him, though the cafe was half empty. "I'm waiting for someone who's apparently going to be late, and my laptop battery died. Mind if I sit while they find a charger?" They talked for 2 hours. She was witty, intelligent, asked thoughtful questions about his business without seeming gold-diggy. When her friend never showed up, Byron had offered to buy her dinner. She'd countered with coffee the next day instead. "I like to take things slow," she'd said with a smile that made his chest tight. Now, as they reached his car, that same smile felt different somehow. Practiced, like she'd perfected it in a mirror. "Byron," Kara said suddenly, her voice small, "do you ever wonder if we're moving too fast? 8 months isn't very long to really know someone." He stopped, turned to face her fully. Are you having second thoughts? No. The response came too quickly, too sharp. She softened immediately. No, of course not. I love you. It's just, marriage is forever, you know? Once we say those vows, there's no going back. Something cold settled in Byron's stomach, but he pushed it aside. Pre-wedding jitters were normal. He'd read about it. Hey, he said, tilting her chin up. If you need more time. I don't. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate. I'm yours, Byron Shelton. In 3 days, I'll be Mrs. Kara Shelton, and nothing will ever change that. As they drove back to her apartment, Byron couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. After Saturday, nothing would ever be the same. He just wasn't sure anymore that it would be in the way he'd hoped. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. Byron spent Tuesday morning reviewing security footage from his office building's parking garage. It was a habit he developed since starting his consulting firm. Always be aware of your surroundings. Always have backup plans. Success made you a target, and he hadn't clawed his way out of Detroit's east side to become careless now. His phone rang as he watched delivery trucks and employees arrive on screen. Kara's name lit up the display, but when he answered, her voice sounded strained. Byron, honey, I need to cancel lunch today. I have to drive to Milwaukee for this client emergency. I might not be back until tomorrow morning. The day before our wedding, Byron frowned. Can't someone else handle it? It's my biggest contract this year. If I mess this up. She trailed off. I'm so sorry. I know the timing is terrible. Something nagged at Byron. Kara had never mentioned any Milwaukee clients before. What kind of design work requires you to drive there personally? Can't everything be done digitally these days? A pause. It's for a restaurant chain. They want to see physical mock-ups before approving the rebrand. Very old school approach, but they're paying triple my usual rate. Byron made a mental note to ask more about this mysterious client later. Drive safe. Call me when you get there. Of course. Love you. After hanging up, Byron felt restless. He decided to surprise Kara with flowers at her apartment before she left for Milwaukee. He gotten spare keys made months ago. Kara's Lincoln Park apartment was a cozy one-bedroom she'd furnished with vintage finds and her own artwork. Byron let himself in quietly, planning to leave the flowers on her kitchen counter with a note. But as he stepped inside, he heard Kara's voice coming from the bedroom. Absolutely sure this will work? Because if Byron finds out before Saturday, everything falls apart. Byron froze. Who was she talking to? He crept closer to the bedroom door. I've been planning this for 2 years. Byron's the perfect mark, rich, trusting, and completely isolated from his family. Once we're married, the life insurance policies kick in, and then... Kara's voice carried a coldness Byron had never heard before. A male voice responded, muffled through what sounded like a speakerphone. And the father? The ex-cop. Raymond Archer thinks I'm a saint. He's already talking about grandchildren and Sunday dinners. The man who could expose everything is actually helping me pull it off. Byron's blood turned to ice. His hand instinctively moved to his phone, but he fought the urge to call for help. He needed to hear more. What about the Milwaukee thing? The voice asked. Perfect alibi. I'll be nowhere near Chicago when the accident happens. Make sure it looks exactly like what happened to Marcus and David. Break failure, just like we practice. Marcus and David. Byron's mind raced. Were those names supposed to mean something to him? Speaking of which, Kara continued, did you dispose of David's things like I asked? That watch could be traced back to me. Everything's gone, including his laptop with all those love letters you had him write. Kara laughed, a sound that made Byron's skin crawl. God, he was so pathetic. I've never felt love like this, Kara. You complete me. Almost felt bad taking his money. Almost. David Chun was worth $3 million. Marcus Williams was worth 2.5. Byron's worth $5 million, not counting the business. A girl's got to eat. Byron's legs nearly buckled. She was talking about murder, multiple murders. His mind flashed to the newspaper articles he'd skimmed over the past year. Hadn't there been something about a young businessman dying in a car accident? And another one? I have to go, Kara said. Need to pack for Milwaukee and call Byron back. He's getting suspicious about the client story. Just stick to the plan. Friday night, brake line gets cut. Saturday morning, Tragic accident on his way to pick up the wedding rings. You're devastated, collect the insurance, and we're set for life. Byron backed away from the door, his heart hammering so loud he was sure they'd hear it. He made it to the front door just as Kara's bedroom door opened. Byron, her voice carried perfectly, surprised, delighted. What are you doing here? He turned, holding up the flowers with hands that somehow stayed steady. Wanted to surprise you before your trip. I was just leaving the flowers. Kara's smile was radiant, but Byron now saw it for what it was, a mask worn by a predator. You're so sweet, but you almost gave me a heart attack. I didn't hear you come in. Sorry, beautiful. I wanted it to be a surprise. He kissed her forehead, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to run. Have a safe trip to Milwaukee. I'll miss you. Miss you too, she said, but her eyes were calculating, studying his face for signs he'd overheard something. Byron left the apartment and drove 3 blocks before pulling over and vomiting in an alley. Kara Ewing, the woman he'd planned to spend his life with, was a serial killer, and in 3 days, he was supposed to be her next victim. But Byron Shelton hadn't built a multi-million-dollar business by panicking under pressure. He'd grown up watching his father work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, had put himself through Northwestern on scholarships and student loans, had outmaneuvered competitors twice his size and men with 10 times his connections. If Kara wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong mark. Byron pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Raymond Archer's number. If anyone would know how to catch a killer, it would be a former detective. But first, he needed to be smart about this. Kara expected him to die Friday night. Instead, Friday night would be when her carefully laid plans began to crumble. Chapter 3: The Detective's Dilemma. Raymond Archer was cleaning his service weapon when Byron's call came through. 30 years on the force had taught him to recognize desperation in a man's voice, and Byron Shelton sounded like a man balanced on a knife's edge. Raymond, I need to see you. Tonight. It's about Kara. What about her? Is she okay? Just meet me at O'Malley's on Clark Street. Come alone. Raymond arrived at the dimly lit pub to find Byron hunched over a whiskey, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something haunted. The younger man looked up as Raymond slid into the booth across from him. She's not who we think she is, Byron said without preamble. Raymond studied Byron's face. No signs of intoxication despite the glass in front of him. No obvious physical injuries. But something had shaken this man to his core. Start from the beginning. Byron recounted what he'd overheard at Kara's apartment, watching Raymond's expression shift from skepticism to alarm to cold professional focus. When Byron finished, Raymond sat in silence for a long moment. Marcus and David, Raymond said finally. I remember those cases. Marcus Williams, car accident 6 months ago. David Chun, similar accident 4 months before that. Both young, wealthy, both had recently gotten engaged. To Kara. Different names, but Raymond pulled out his phone. Scrolling through notes, he kept on old cases that had bothered him. Marcus was engaged to a Laura Stone. David to a Caitlin Edwards. Both women were graphic designers. Both had lost their parents young. Byron's hands clenched into fists. How many others? I'll need to check. But Byron, we can't just call this in. Everything you heard is hearsay. She could claim you misunderstood, that you're having cold feet and trying to sabotage the wedding. So what do we do? Raymond leaned forward. We get evidence. Real evidence. And we need to be smart about it, because if she realizes we're onto her. He let the implications hang between them. She thinks I'm going to die Friday night. Car accident, brake failure. Byron's voice was steady now, the shock replaced by cold determination. What if we let her think her plan worked? Raymond studied the younger man. In 3 decades of police work, he'd seen plenty of civilians crack under pressure. But Byron Shelton wasn't cracking. He was adapting. What are you thinking? I survived Friday night. But Kara doesn't know that. We make her think I'm dead, see what she does next. Maybe she gets careless, contacts her partner, tries to collect insurance money. Meanwhile, you investigate the other deaths officially. That's dangerous as hell. If she realizes you're alive, then we better make sure she doesn't. Byron finished his whiskey. I didn't get where I am by playing it safe, Raymond. And I sure as hell didn't survive growing up in Detroit by backing down from bullies. Raymond saw something flicker in Byron's eyes, something hard and unforgiving. This wasn't just about saving his own life anymore. This was about justice for Marcus and David and however many others Kara had killed. There's something else, Raymond said slowly. I need to tell you about my daughter. Byron looked up sharply. She's not my biological daughter. I've been waiting for the right time to mention it. Didn't want to complicate things before the wedding. Raymond's weathered hands wrapped around his beer. 26 years ago, I responded to a domestic violence call. Woman named Sarah Ewing and her 5-year-old daughter. Mother was beaten half to death. Father was long gone. Sarah died in the hospital 3 days later. Byron felt the world tilt. Kara, the little girl, went into the system. I tried to keep track of her, but she disappeared from foster care when she was 16. Next time I saw her was 2 years ago when she walked into that coffee shop where you were having a meeting. You're saying she targeted me specifically? Knew who you were? I'm saying Kara Ewing has been planning something a lot longer than 8 months. Raymond's jaw tightened. And I think I know why. Byron's phone buzzed with a text from Kara. Safely in Milwaukee. Miss you already. See you Friday night for our rehearsal dinner. Can't wait to be your wife. Red heart. The heart emoji looked like a drop of blood on the screen. Friday night, Byron said, showing Raymond the message. She want me to believe everything's normal right up until the end, which gives us 2 days to build a case and set our own trap. Raymond stood up. I still have contacts in the department. I can get the files on Marcus and David reopened quietly. You need to act normal, but start documenting everything. Phone calls, text messages, any evidence of her real identity. And if we can't get enough evidence by Friday. Raymond's expression hardened, and Byron saw the cop he used to be. Then we get creative. My duty was always to protect and serve, even if it meant bending rules. Some people don't deserve the benefit of legal technicalities. Byron nodded, understanding passing between them. She made one mistake. What's that? She picked a target with a cop for a father-in-law. Byron stood, and Raymond saw the transformation beginning. The mild-mannered tech executive was being replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. She wants to play predator and prey? Fine, but she's about to learn that sometimes the prey bites back. As they left O'Malley's separately, no need to be seen together if Kara had them under surveillance. Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just unleashed something that might be more dangerous than the woman who'd been planning to kill his daughter's fiancé. But Marcus Williams and David Chun deserve justice. And if Kara Ewing thought she could use his love for her to destroy a good man, she was about to discover how wrong she could be. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. Byron's tech consulting firm occupied the top 3 floors of a LaSalle Street high-rise, a testament to his journey from scholarship kid to self-made millionaire. Wednesday morning found him in his private office, but instead of reviewing client contracts, he was planning something far more personal. He'd spent the sleepless night after meeting Raymond researching everything he could find about Marcus Williams and David Chun. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Marcus Williams, 29, founder of a successful app development company, engaged to Laura Stone, a graphic designer, died in a single-car accident when his brakes failed on Lakeshore Drive. Laura had been in New York on business. She'd inherited everything after a brief, highly publicized grieving period where she'd spoken eloquently about their love and her loss. David Chun, 31, investment banker, engaged to Caitlin Edwards, also a graphic designer. Brake failure, also on Lakeshore Drive. Caitlin had been visiting her sick grandmother in Florida. Another fortune inherited by a grieving fiancé. The photos Byron found online made his stomach churn. Laura Stone and Caitlin Edwards were the same woman, Kara Ewing, with different hair colors and styles, but the same predatory smile. Byron's assistant Corey knocked and entered. The private investigator you requested is here. Send him in. Luther Waters was everything Central Casting would order for a private detective, grizzled, sharp-eyed, wearing a coat that had seen better decades. But Byron had done his homework. Waters was former FBI, specializing in white-collar crime and identity theft. Mr. Shelton, Corey says you need someone looked into quietly. Byron slid a file across his desk containing everything he'd compiled on Kara's various identities. Her real name might be Kara Ewing, but she's also been Laura Stone and Caitlin Edwards. I need to know everything. Where she really came from, how many other identities she's used, and most importantly, how many other men have died. Waters flipped through the documents, his expression growing increasingly grim. This is a serial killer, Mr. Shelton. Why aren't the police handling this? They will be. But right now, she thinks she's about to kill me on Friday night. I need evidence before then, or I need to disappear and let her think she succeeded. Disappear? Byron leaned forward. I have a plan, but I need to know who I'm really dealing with first. Waters nodded slowly. Give me 12 hours. My fee is $5,000 a day, plus expenses. Money's not an issue. Find me everything. After Waters left, Byron's phone rang. Raymond Archer. I've been making calls, Raymond said. Officially, I'm reviewing cold cases for a consulting job. Marcus Williams and David Shun are just the tip of the iceberg. How many others? At least 4 more in the past 3 years. All the same pattern. Young, wealthy, recently engaged men dying in car accidents. All their fiancés were graphic designers with dead parents, and all of them inherited everything. Byron felt sick. 6 men that we know of. There could be more in other states. This woman's been perfecting her technique. Any connection to her partner? The man she was talking to on the phone? Working on it. But Byron, there's something else. I did some digging into Kara's background. The Sarah Ewing who died 26 years ago, she had 2 daughters, not 1. Byron's hand tightened on the phone. A sister. Twin sister. Both girls went into foster care, but only one, Karen Ewing, stayed in the system. The other one, Kimberly, was adopted by a family in Milwaukee. Milwaukee, where Kara claimed to be right now. Raymond, what if the woman I'm engaged to isn't even Kara Ewing? What if she's the twin sister? Then we're dealing with something a lot more complicated than a simple Black Widow case. Byron ended the call and immediately tried reaching Kara. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again an hour later. Same result. That evening, Byron drove to Kara's apartment. Using his key, he let himself in and immediately noticed things that seemed off now that he knew what to look for. The vintage furniture wasn't collected over time. It was all from the same estate sale, still had matching price tags tucked beneath cushions. The personal photos on her walls showed her with people he'd never met, in places she'd never mentioned visiting. In her bedroom closet, Byron found a suitcase he'd never seen before. Inside were identification documents for Laura Stone and Caitlin Edwards, complete with driver's licenses and credit cards. There was also a prescription bottle for anxiety medication, prescribed to Karen Ewing. So she was using her real name, just spelled differently. At the bottom of the suitcase was a leather portfolio containing what looked like surveillance photos of him. Pictures of Byron leaving his office, entering his building, at restaurants he frequented. Some were taken weeks before they'd supposedly met at the coffee shop. Their entire relationship had been alive from day one. Byron's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop looking where you don't belong, or you'll join your friends Marcus and David a lot sooner than Friday. He looked around the apartment, suddenly aware he might not be alone. But instead of fear, Byron felt something else entirely. A cold, calculating anger that reminded him why he'd been successful in business. When competitors tried to undercut him, he didn't panic. He outmaneuvered them. Kara Ewing had made a critical error. She'd chosen to threaten someone who'd spent his entire life being underestimated, someone who'd learned to turn his opponent's strengths against them. Byron carefully replaced everything in the suitcase exactly as he'd found it, then used his phone to photograph every document. As he prepared to leave, he noticed one more thing, a business card tucked into Kara's jewelry box. Terry Mayo, insurance investigator. Byron pocketed the card. If Kara had an insurance investigator in her back pocket, that explained how she'd managed to collect on multiple policies without raising red flags. As he locked Kara's apartment door behind him, Byron's phone rang again. Luther Waters. Mr. Shelton, you're going to want to hear this. Your fiancé has been very busy. I found 7 different identities, and that's just what I could uncover in one day. How many dead fiancés? 8, maybe 9. There's one in Seattle that's still listed as missing. And Mr. Shelton? She's not working alone. This is a whole operation. Byron smiled for the first time in 2 days, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Good. That means when I take her down, I can take them all down with her. Sir, with respect, you should let law enforcement handle this. Law enforcement had their chance. 8 good men are dead because this woman is smart enough to stay ahead of the system. Byron's voice carried a steel that would have been familiar to anyone who'd watched him destroy business rivals. But she made one mistake. She assumed I'd be victim number 9. As Byron drove home, his mind was already working through the possibilities. Kara expected him to die Friday night. Instead, Friday night would be when Kara Ewing learned that some prey fight back. And when they do, they don't just survive, they hunt. Chapter 5. Setting the Stage. Thursday morning brought news that chilled Byron to the bone. Luther Waters called at dawn with an update that changed everything. Mr. Shelton, I found the missing link. Terry Mayo isn't just helping with insurance claims. He's her partner in every sense of the word. They've been running this con for 5 years, and it's not just about money anymore. Byron sat up in bed, instantly alert. What do you mean? I tracked their communications. They're not just killing for inheritance money. They're selling information about their victims' businesses to competitors, using their access to steal client lists, trade secrets, even insider trading information. Marcus Williams' app concept showed up in a competitor's product 6 months after he died. David Chin's investment strategies were being used by a rival firm within weeks of his death. So they're not just killers, they're corporate spies. Gets worse. I found evidence they've been blackmailing other wealthy men they didn't kill. Men who figured out what they were doing, but were too scared to come forward. Byron's mind raced through the implications. How many people are involved in this? At minimum 4. Kara, Terry Mayo, someone in Milwaukee who provides alibis and false identities, and someone inside the Chicago PD who makes sure investigations into these accidents don't go too deep. A dirty cop. Has to be. These brake failure accidents are too clean, happen too conveniently. Someone's making sure the right evidence disappears and the wrong questions don't get asked. Byron ended the call and immediately phoned Raymond. We need to meet. Now. They convened at a 24-hour diner in Cicero, far from anywhere Kara or her associates might spot them. Raymond looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. I've been thinking about this all night, Raymond said. If there's a dirty cop involved, we can't trust anyone in the department. We're on our own. Good, Byron replied. I prefer working with people I trust completely. Byron, son, I need to ask you something directly. Are you thinking about taking justice into your own hands here? Byron met the older man's gaze steadily. I'm thinking about making sure no other good man dies because of that woman. Whatever that takes. Raymond nodded slowly. Then I need to tell you some things about real police work that they don't teach in the academy. For the next hour, Raymond walked Byron through the realities of evidence collection, surveillance, and what it really took to catch criminals who were smart enough to stay ahead of the system. It wasn't always about following rules. Sometimes it was about being smarter and more ruthless than the people you were hunting. The brake line sabotage will happen tomorrow night, Raymond explained. They'll wait until you're asleep, then cut the lines so the failure happens when you're driving Saturday morning. We need to catch them in the act, or we let them think they succeeded. Byron's voice carried a note that made Raymond reassess the man across from him. What if Byron Shelton dies in that car accident, but someone else survives to hunt them down? Thursday afternoon, Byron called a meeting with his business attorney, Mark Cameron. Cameron was one of the few people Byron trusted completely. They'd met at Northwestern, roommates who'd helped each other survive law school and business school respectively. Mark, I need you to execute Plan B. Cameron looked up sharply. Plan B was something they developed years ago as a worst-case scenario protection strategy, a way to make Byron Shelton legally disappear while preserving his assets under a different identity. Byron, what's happened? Byron explained everything, watching his oldest friend's expression grow increasingly grim. So Friday night, Byron Shelton dies in a car accident, Cameron said slowly. But Kenneth Shelton, your cousin who's been living overseas for years, returns to Chicago to settle the estate. Exactly. Kenneth inherited everything through a trust we established last year. Kenneth also happens to look remarkably like Byron, just with different hair and a beard. And Kenneth Shelton has every legal right to investigate his cousin's suspicious death, especially when he discovers his cousin was about to marry a woman with multiple identities and a history of dead fiancés. Cameron leaned back in his chair. This is incredibly dangerous, Byron. If they discover you're alive before you can expose them, then I better make sure they don't. That evening, Byron received a call from Kara. Her voice bubbled with excitement, but he could hear the strain underneath. Byron, Milwaukee went perfectly. The client loved everything. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, just in time for our rehearsal dinner. Can't wait to see you, beautiful. I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. About taking things slow. Kara's voice dropped to a whisper. After Saturday, we'll have forever to take things as slow as we want. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. After Saturday, in her mind, he'd be dead. Forever sounds perfect, Byron replied. Sweet dreams, Kara. After hanging up, Byron sat in his penthouse looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus Williams and David Chun had spent their last nights alive, probably excited about their upcoming weddings, probably texting their fiancés goodnight messages just like he had. But unlike them, Byron Shelton knew what was coming. And unlike them, he had no intention of going quietly. Byron opened his laptop and began typing a detailed letter. Everything he discovered, everything he suspected, and instructions for what to do if something went wrong. He sealed it in an envelope addressed to his attorney with instructions not to open it unless Byron failed to contact him by Sunday night. Then he began the careful process of becoming Kenneth Shelton. Hair dye, colored contacts, temporary facial hair. By morning, Byron Shelton would be ready to die, and Kenneth Shelton would be ready to hunt. Chapter 6. The Perfect Crime. Friday arrived with unseasonably warm October weather, the kind of day that should have filled Byron with joy about his upcoming wedding. Instead, he spent the morning in his office finalizing the details of his own fake death. At precisely 2 p.m., Byron's phone rang. Kara, right on schedule. I'm back. Her voice was bright, animated. Can you pick me up at the airport? I know you're busy, but I missed you so much. Of course. O'Hare or Midway? O'Hare. Terminal 3. I'll be at baggage claim. Another lie. Luther Waters had confirmed that no flights from Milwaukee had arrived at O'Hare that afternoon. Kara was already in Chicago, probably had been the entire time. Byron drove to the airport, spotting Kara immediately despite her new blonde hair, a detail she hadn't mentioned on the phone. She ran to him like a woman in love, but Byron noticed how her eyes scanned the terminal constantly, watching for threats or witnesses. You changed your hair, he said as they embraced. Wanted to surprise you. Do you like it? She spun around, and Byron forced himself to smile convincingly. Beautiful. You're always beautiful. During the drive back to her apartment, Kara chattered about her fictional Milwaukee trip, providing details that would have convinced anyone who wasn't listening for inconsistencies. But Byron caught them all. She mentioned snow that hadn't fallen, restaurants that didn't exist, clients whose businesses weren't registered in Wisconsin. I'm so tired, she said as they reached her building. Mind if I take a nap before tonight? I want to be perfect for our rehearsal dinner. Of course. I'll pick you up at 7. Actually, Kara touched his arm, her fingers like ice despite the warm day. Why don't you meet me at the restaurant? I might run a little late, hair appointment and all. Byron nodded, understanding. She wanted him to drive alone to the restaurant, so her partner could sabotage his car in her building's parking lot. At 5 p.m., Byron called Raymond from a burner phone he'd purchased that morning. It's happening tonight. She wants me to drive separately to dinner so they can cut my brake lines in her parking lot. Are you sure about this plan? Too late for second thoughts. Byron was in his bathroom, applying the final touches to his Kenneth Shelton transformation. The man in the mirror looked enough like him to be a cousin, but different enough that casual observers wouldn't immediately recognize Byron. By midnight tonight, Byron Shelton will be dead, and Kenneth Shelton will be flying back from London to settle his cousin's estate. And if something goes wrong, then arrest Kara Ewing for the murder of Byron Shelton and let the system handle the rest. At 6:30 p.m., Byron drove his Tesla Model S to Kara's building and parked exactly where she'd expect him to. The parking garage's security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned earlier that day. Luther Waters had verified the timing. Someone had definitely planned this carefully. Byron took the elevator to the building's roof access, then used the fire escape to reach his actual car, a rental sedan he'd parked 2 blocks away under Kenneth Shelton's driver's license. From his position across the street, he watched through high-powered binoculars as a man in maintenance coveralls entered the parking garage. Terry Mayo looked exactly like Byron had imagined. Average height, forgettable face, the kind of man who could blend into any crowd. Byron photographed him from every angle as Mayo worked methodically under Byron's Tesla, severing brake lines with practiced efficiency. At 7 p.m. sharp, Byron called Kara from his burner phone, disguising his voice slightly. "Kara? It's Byron. I'm running a few minutes late. Got caught up at the office. Start without me." "Oh no. Are you okay? You sound different. Just tired. Long day. Order me the salmon, would you?" "Of course, darling. Drive safe." Byron almost laughed at the irony. At 7:15, Byron watched his own Tesla leave the parking garage with someone else behind the wheel. Through his binoculars, he could see it was Terry Mayo wearing Byron's jacket and a baseball cap. The plan was more sophisticated than he'd expected. They were actually going to stage his death in real time. Byron followed at a distance as the Tesla headed toward Lakeshore Drive. His phone buzzed with texts from Kara. "Where are you? I'm getting worried." "Byron, please call me back. The restaurant says you haven't arrived. Did something happen?" At 8:47 p.m., Byron's phone exploded with calls. First from Kara, then from emergency services, then from Raymond, who was playing his role perfectly. "Byron, thank God you answered. There's been an accident. Your car went off Lakeshore Drive into the lake. They're searching for you now, but..." "What?" Byron injected exactly the right amount of shock into his voice. "That's impossible. I'm at home. I never left." "What do you mean you're at home? Kara said you were driving to meet her for dinner." "I canceled. Didn't feel well." Kara said she understood. A long pause as Raymond processed the implications. "Byron, if you're at home, then who was driving your car?" I don't know. Someone stole it. We need to get down to the lake. Now." By 10 p.m., the entire charade was in full swing. Police boats searched the dark waters of Lake Michigan while Byron, posing as a distraught fiancé who'd narrowly avoided death, gave statements about his stolen vehicle. Kara arrived at the scene in a taxi, apparently hysterical with grief. She threw herself into Raymond's arms, sobbing about how she'd waited at the restaurant, how she'd known something was wrong when Byron didn't show up. "I should have insisted he let me drive," she cried. "If I'd been with him." Byron watched from behind police barriers as the woman he'd planned to marry gave an Oscar-worthy performance of devastated grief. She was good. He'd give her that. But what Kara didn't know was that Terry Mayo was already in custody. Raymond had coordinated with the FBI based on Luther Waters' evidence, and Mayo had been arrested the moment he'd abandoned Byron's car and tried to flee the scene. What she also didn't know was that Byron had installed tracking devices in all of his vehicles 6 months ago, a security precaution that would now provide perfect evidence of who had really been driving his car when it went into the lake. As the fake search continued into the night, Byron received a text on his burner phone from Luther Waters. "Package delivered." Kenneth Shelton's flight records show he landed at O'Hare 3 hours ago. Byron Shelton was officially dead. Kenneth Shelton had inherited everything, and Kara Ewing was about to discover that her perfect crime had been turned into the perfect trap. Standing in the shadows, watching his own death being investigated, Byron felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, the pure satisfaction of beating a bully at their own game. Now came the fun part. Chapter 7. The Resurrection. Kenneth Shelton arrived at Raymond Archer's house Saturday morning, looking appropriately grief-stricken for a man who'd just lost his cousin. The beard, darker hair, and horn-rimmed glasses transformed him enough that even Raymond did a double-take. "Jesus, you look different." "Good. That's the point." Byron accepted the coffee Raymond offered, studying the police files spread across the kitchen table. "What's our status?" "Terry Mayo is singing like a canary. Turns out when you face federal charges for multiple murders, loyalty becomes negotiable." Raymond flipped through pages of testimony. The operation is bigger than we thought. They've been targeting wealthy bachelors across 6 states for the past 5 years. How many victims total? Confirmed? 12. Suspected? At least 18. Raymond's jaw tightened, and Mayo confirmed what we suspected about the dirty cop. Detective Wilcherry has been burying evidence and steering investigations away from the pattern. Byron studied photos of Terry Mayo, a weak-faced man in his 40s who looked like he'd never had an original thought in his life. What's his relationship to Kara? Common-law husband. They've been together since they aged out of foster care. Started small, pickpocketing, credit card fraud, then graduated to romance scams. The killing didn't start until 3 years ago when one of their marks figured out the con and threatened to expose them. So they killed him to keep him quiet and realized dead men tell no tales and leave bigger payouts. Mayo says it was Kara's idea to make it their primary business model. Byron absorbed this information, feeling his resolve harden further. Kara hadn't just stolen money from her victims. She'd stolen their futures, their dreams, their chance at real love. Where is she now? Playing the grieving widow. She spent last night at the police station, giving statements and demanding they drag the lake for your body. Oscar-worthy performance, according to the officers who interviewed her. And the wedding? Canceled, obviously. She's told everyone she's too devastated to think about celebration. She's even asked the church to hold a memorial service instead. Byron almost had to admire the audacity. Kara was going to attend his own memorial service and play the grieving bride-to-be. Here's what we're going to do, Byron said, pulling out a detailed plan he'd spent the night perfecting. Kenneth Shelton is going to attend that memorial service. He's Byron's grief-stricken cousin from London, here to settle the estate and find out what really happened to his beloved family member. Raymond studied the documents Byron handed him. You've thought this through. I've had practice outthinking people who underestimate me. Byron's smile was sharp. Kara's about to learn that her perfect victim was actually her worst nightmare. Saturday evening, Memorial Methodist Church was packed with mourners. Byron had been more social than he'd realized. Colleagues, clients, neighbors, even his old Northwestern classmates had come to pay their respects. It would have been touching if it weren't completely fake. Byron entered the church as Kenneth Shelton just as the service began, taking a seat in the back where he could observe without being obvious. Kara sat in the front row wearing black Valentino, her blonde hair perfect, her grief absolutely convincing to anyone who didn't know better. Pastor Garrett Maynard spoke eloquently about Byron's life, his journey from poverty to success, his charitable work, his devotion to family. Byron had to fight back genuine emotion listening to his own eulogy. Then Kara took the podium. She began, her voice breaking perfectly. He was the kindest man I'd ever met. He saw good in everyone, trusted completely, maybe too completely. The irony was suffocating. 3 days ago, we were planning our future together. We talked about children, about growing old together, about all the adventures we'd have. Tears streamed down her face, real tears, which Byron found disturbing. I keep thinking, if only I'd insisted on driving with him. If only I'd said the right thing to make him stay home that night. She paused, composing herself with visible effort. But I know Byron wouldn't want us to dwell on tragedy. He'd want us to celebrate the love we shared, the time we had together, however brief it was. Byron watched the congregation nod sympathetically, completely taken in by her performance. If he didn't know better, he'd believe her too. After the service, Kenneth Shelton approached Kara during the reception in the church basement. Ms. Ewing? I'm Kenneth Shelton, Byron's cousin. Kara looked up with red-rimmed eyes, studying Kenneth's face with an intensity that made Byron glad for his disguise. Kenneth, Byron mentioned you. You live in London. I did. I'm back now to settle his affairs. Kenneth's British accent was perfect, something Byron had perfected during a year abroad at Cambridge. I'm sorry for your loss. Byron spoke of you constantly in our phone calls. He was a wonderful man. Kara dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I still can't believe he's gone. The police investigation, do they have any leads on who might have stolen his car? Something flickered behind Kara's eyes. I think they believe it was just random. Car thieves, you know. Wrong place, wrong time. Kenneth appeared to consider this. Strange that car thieves would steal a vehicle just to crash it into the lake. Usually they want to strip it for parts or sell it overseas. I don't really understand criminal motivations. I'm just trying to get through each day. Byron saw it then, the moment when Kara realized Kenneth Shelton might not be the grieving cousin he appeared to be. Her smile became more calculated, her posture more defensive. I should let you grieve privately, Kenneth said, backing away smoothly. Perhaps we could have coffee sometime this week? I'd love to hear more stories about Byron. It would help with the funeral arrangements. Of course. I'd like that. As Kenneth walked away, Byron caught Kara immediately pulling out her phone. She was texting someone, her fingers moving urgently across the screen. Byron smiled behind his fake beard. Kara was starting to worry, and worried criminals made mistakes. By Sunday morning, Kenneth Shelton would begin asking very uncomfortable questions about his cousin's death. Questions that would force Kara and her partners to either run or fight. Byron was counting on them choosing to fight, because when they did, he'd be ready. Chapter 8. The Trap Springs. Sunday morning brought chaos to Kara's carefully constructed world. Kenneth Shelton had spent Saturday night doing everything a suspicious cousin might do, filing wrongful death suits, demanding police reports, and most dangerously, hiring Luther Waters to investigate Byron's death privately. Byron watched from his rental car as Terry Mayo arrived at Kara's apartment building, his movements urgent and panicked. Through his listening device planted in Kara's living room, Byron heard their conversation clearly. He's not going away. Terry's voice was high with stress. This Kenneth guy is asking too many questions. He's already got lawyers looking into the insurance policies. Calm down. Kara's voice carried its familiar coldness. Kenneth Shelton is just a grieving relative. We can handle one man. Can we? Because he's already connected Marcus and David's deaths to Byron's. Luther Waters is good. Too good. He's found financial connections we thought we'd buried. Byron smiled grimly. Waters had indeed found the connections because Byron had given them to him. Then we eliminate the problem, Kara said simply. Kenneth Shelton came back from London to investigate his cousin's death. Tragic that he'll die in the same type of accident. Kara, we can't just keep killing people. The pattern dies with Kenneth. After that, we disappear. We've got enough money to vanish completely. What about Detective Cherry? He's starting to ask questions too. Well, Cherry has taken enough of our money over the years. If he's having second thoughts now, maybe it's time he had an accident too. Byron's blood ran cold. They were planning to kill Raymond. Speaking of which, Kara continued, where did you dump Byron's car? The police haven't found it yet. Bottom of Calumet Harbor, like always. 40 feet down in the shipping channel. They'll never find it. Byron had to hand it to them. They'd perfected their system. No wonder previous investigations had failed. His earpiece crackled with Luther Waters' voice. Teams are in position. We have Mayo, Kara, and Detective Cherry under surveillance. Raymond is secure. Byron spoke into his throat mic. They're planning to kill Kenneth today and Raymond tomorrow. We need to move now. Copy that. FBI is standing by. Byron drove to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where Kenneth Shelton was about to suffer a very public nervous breakdown that would require immediate psychiatric evaluation. It was the perfect excuse to disappear for 48 hours while the FBI rounded up the conspirators. But as Byron walked through the hospital parking lot, his phone rang. Kara's number. Kenneth? Her voice was sweet, concerned. This is Kara Ewing, Byron's fiancé. I was wondering if you'd like to come by for dinner tonight. I'm cooking Byron's favorite meal, and I thought, well, it might help us both with the grieving process. The trap was being set, but Byron realized Kara was setting one for him just as he was setting one for her. That's very kind of you, Kara. What time? 7? I'm at 1247 Fullerton Parkway, apartment 3B. I'll see you then. Byron hung up and immediately called Luther Waters. Change of plans. They're moving faster than expected. Sir, you're walking into a trap. No, Byron corrected. They're walking into mine. That afternoon, Byron received devastating news. Detective Cherry had been found dead in his apartment. Apparent suicide, with a note confessing to taking bribes, but claiming no knowledge of any murders. It was clean, convenient, and obviously staged. "They're eliminating witnesses," Raymond told him over encrypted radio. Cherry probably threatened to expose them when Kenneth Shelton started asking questions. "Then we end this tonight." Byron arrived at Kara's building at exactly 7 p.m., Kenneth Shelton's grief-stricken expression firmly in place. But beneath the fake beard and colored contacts, his eyes were hard as diamonds. Kara met him at her apartment door, wearing a simple black dress that made her look vulnerable and innocent. The sight of her might have broken Byron's heart if he hadn't known what lay beneath the surface. "Kenneth, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult." The apartment smelled like Byron's favorite meal, osso buco with risotto, something Kara had prepared for him dozens of times. She'd even opened a bottle of the expensive Burlo he'd introduced her to. "It smells wonderful," Kenneth said, accepting the wine glass she offered. "Byron always said you were an amazing cook." He was too kind. Kara settled onto the couch beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. The same perfume that had driven him crazy when they'd first met. "Tell me about growing up with Byron. I'd love to hear stories." For 20 minutes, Byron spun tales about a fictional childhood with his cousin, watching Kara's face for signs she suspected anything. She was good, attentive, asking follow-up questions, playing the part of a woman genuinely interested in her dead lover's family. But Byron noticed she wasn't drinking her wine, and when she thought he wasn't looking, she checked her watch frequently. "You know," Kara said suddenly, "Byron told me you work in international finance. That must be fascinating. It has its moments. Mostly boring, really. Numbers and spreadsheets. Still, you must travel constantly. See amazing places, meet interesting people." Her hand touched his arm lightly. "Ever get lonely?" And there it was, the setup Byron had been waiting for. Kara was already planning her next con, sizing up Kenneth Shelton as a potential replacement for Byron. "Constantly," Kenneth replied sadly. "Especially now. Byron was really the only family I had left." Byron watched Kara's eyes light up with predatory interest. A wealthy, lonely man devastated by grief? Perfect target. But Byron's earpiece crackled with urgent words from Luther Waters. "Abort. Abort. Terry Mayo escaped federal custody 20 minutes ago. He's armed and heading toward your location." Byron's wine glass slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on Kara's hardwood floor. "Oh no." Kara jumped up. "Let me get that." As she bent to clean the glass, Byron saw her smile, cold, triumphant, and absolutely terrifying. "You know, Kenneth," she said without looking up, "I have a confession to make. I know exactly who you really are." Byron's hand moved instinctively toward the gun hidden under his jacket, but Kara was faster. When she straightened, she held a small pistol aimed directly at his chest. "Hello, Byron. Welcome back from the dead." Chapter 9. Justice Served. Byron raised his hands slowly, his mind calculating distances and angles. Kara held the gun professionally, not her first time threatening someone with deadly force. "When did you know?" he asked, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. "The memorial service. You did a good job with the disguise, but I've spent months studying every detail of your face, your mannerisms, your voice. Plus, Kenneth Shelton's passport shows he's been in London continuously for the past year. Hard to fly back for a funeral when you never left. Impressive research. I'm thorough. It's why I've stayed ahead of people like you for so long." Kara moved closer, the gun never wavering. "The real question is, how long have you known about me?" "Since Tuesday. I overheard your phone call with Terry." Kara's composure cracked slightly. "You've been playing me for 3 days? Learn from the best, apparently." "Terry should be here any minute," Kara said, checking her watch again. "Once he arrives, we'll stage Kenneth Shelton's suicide." Grief-stricken cousin couldn't handle losing the last of his family. Very touching. Byron laughed, a sound that made Kara step back. "You still don't understand, do you? Terry Mayo was arrested yesterday night. He's in federal custody, probably telling investigators everything he knows about your little operation." "You're lying. Detective Wilcherry is dead. Apparent suicide, but we both know you killed him when he became a liability." Byron took a small step to his left, closer to the kitchen island. How many others, Kara? How many people have you murdered besides the men you conned? Only people who got in the way. Her mask was slipping, revealing something cold and reptilian underneath. Marcus was supposed to be a simple con until he hired a private investigator to check my background. David figured out I'd stolen his client list and threatened to go to the police. They made their choices. And the others? Collateral damage. She shrugged, as casual as discussing the weather. This world eats people alive, Byron. I just learned to bite first. Byron saw movement outside the apartment window. FBI agents taking position. But Kara's attention was fixed entirely on him now, her finger tightening on the trigger. You want to know the funny thing? Kara continued. I actually like you more than the others. You were smarter, more challenging. Under different circumstances, I might have kept you around longer. How generous. Don't be sarcastic. It doesn't suit you. Her voice turned wistful. We could have been something real, you and I. If you just died quietly like you were supposed to. Byron shifted his weight, preparing to move. There's something you should know about me, Kara. I don't die quietly. The apartment's front door exploded inward as FBI agents stormed in. Kara spun toward the sound, and Byron launched himself over the kitchen island, tackling her to the ground. The gun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as they struggled. But Kara was stronger than she looked, and Byron found himself fighting for his life against someone trained in violence. She clawed at his eyes, drove her knee toward his groin, fought with the desperate strength of someone who had everything to lose. Federal agents, drop your weapon. Kara managed to break free from Byron's grip and rolled toward where her gun had fallen. Byron saw her fingers close around the handle just as Raymond Archer appeared in the doorway, his own service weapon drawn. Don't do it, Kara. She looked up at Raymond with eyes full of hatred. You pathetic old fool. You actually thought I cared about you? Thought I wanted you as a father. I know exactly what you are, Raymond replied steadily. What I don't understand is why. Why? Kara laughed bitterly. You want to know why? Because people like you and Byron have everything handed to you, while people like me fight for scraps. You get love, family, success, and what do we get? Foster homes and abuse and a system that throws us away. So you decided to throw away other people instead. I decided to take what I deserve. Kara raised her gun toward Raymond. Byron moved without thinking, throwing himself between them just as Kara fired. The bullet meant for Raymond caught Byron in the shoulder, spinning him around. But his momentum carried him into Kara, and this time when they went down, FBI agents were there immediately to restrain her. Byron! Raymond knelt beside him as paramedics rushed in. Why did you? Because you're going to be my father-in-law, Byron said weakly. Someday, when I find someone worth marrying. As paramedics worked on Byron's shoulder, he watched FBI agents read Kara her rights. She was no longer beautiful to him, just a predator in expensive clothing finally caught. 12 men, he told Raymond as they loaded him into the ambulance. She killed 12 good men who just wanted to love someone. Not anymore, Raymond replied grimly. Federal prosecutors are talking death penalty. Between Mayo's testimony and the evidence we collected, she'll never hurt anyone again. 6 weeks later, Byron sat in his penthouse reading news coverage of Kara Ewing's trial. Terry Mayo had testified in exchange for life without parole, detailing how they'd murdered 18 men across 5 years. The insurance companies were investigating hundreds of fraudulent claims. 3 more corrupt officials had been arrested. Kara herself had maintained her innocence throughout, claiming Byron had fabricated everything because she'd rejected his advances. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, surveillance footage, DNA evidence linking her to multiple crime scenes. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Byron's shoulder had healed completely, though he still felt phantom pain when he thought about what might have happened to future victims if they hadn't acted. Kenneth Shelton had quietly died in a London hospital, and Byron Shelton had miraculously survived his car accident, a detail the media had found touching rather than suspicious. His phone rang as he read about Kara's sentencing. Raymond Archer, Death penalty, Raymond said simply. Unanimous jury recommendation. Good. Byron felt no satisfaction, just a sense of completion. What happens now? Now you get on with your life. Find someone real to love. Have those kids you talked about. Byron looked out at the Chicago skyline, the same view he'd admired the morning this had all started. Maybe someday. Right now, I think I need to learn how to trust again. For what it's worth, son, you did the right thing. 18 families have closure because you were brave enough to fight back. After ending the call, Byron opened his laptop and began typing an email to Marcus Williams' mother and David Chen's father. They deserved to know that their sons' deaths had been avenged, that the woman who'd stolen their children's lives would never hurt anyone else. 3 months later, Byron established the Byron Shelton Foundation for Victims' Rights, dedicating himself to helping law enforcement agencies investigate suspicious deaths involving inheritance fraud. His first case file was submitted by a detective in Miami who'd noticed a pattern of wealthy young women dying in car accidents after quick engagements. Byron smiled as he read the report. Apparently, Kara and Terry hadn't been the only ones who'd figured out that murder could be profitable. But they'd also learned something else. Byron Shelton didn't believe in letting predators hunt freely. And this time, he wouldn't be working alone. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. The morning sun filtered through the pristine windows of the Jackson family home in suburban Denver, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Walker Jackson stood at the kitchen island, methodically preparing his 7-year-old daughter Emily's lunch, his movements precise and calculated, traits that had made him successful in his security consulting business. "Dad, do I have to go to school today?" Emily asked, her small voice barely above a whisper as she picked at her breakfast cereal. Walker studied his daughter's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes that had been growing more pronounced since they'd moved into this house 6 months ago. Emily had always been bright and talkative, but lately, she'd become withdrawn, spending most of her time alone. "Of course, sweetheart. Education is important," Walker replied, though something in his gut told him there was more to her reluctance than typical childhood complaints. His wife, Letha Jackson, breezed into the kitchen wearing a perfectly pressed business suit, her blonde hair immaculately styled. At 34, she still turned heads wherever she went, something Walker had once taken pride in. Now, he noticed how she avoided his gaze, how her phone seemed permanently attached to her hand. "I'll be late tonight," Letha announced, grabbing her coffee cup without looking at either of them. "Big client meeting." Walker nodded, though he'd noticed these big client meetings had become increasingly frequent. Letha worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized firm downtown, a job that had never required such extensive overtime before. "Which client?" Walker asked casually, but Letha was already heading toward the garage. "The Morrison account," she called back, her voice slightly too high. "Adrian thinks we might land the contract if we present tonight." Adrian. Walker had heard that name mentioned more often lately. Adrian Potts, the creative director at Letha's firm, was supposedly spearheading several major campaigns. Walker made a mental note to research Mr. Potts more thoroughly. After Letha left, Walker helped Emily gather her backpack, noticing how she carefully avoided the family room where her older brother Kyle usually watched morning cartoons. Kyle, their 15-year-old, had been different lately too, defensive, argumentative, and oddly protective of his mother. "Emily, is everything okay at school? At home?" Walker asked, kneeling to her level. Emily's eyes darted around nervously before she shook her head. "Everything's fine, Daddy." But Walker Jackson hadn't built a successful security firm by ignoring his instincts. 20 years of military service and another 10 running background checks and threat assessments for high-profile clients had taught him to read people, to spot lies, to identify vulnerabilities. His own family, it seemed, was full of them. As he drove Emily to school, Walker's mind wandered to the changes he'd observed over the past months. The new house had been Letha's idea, a fresh start, she'd called it. Bigger, more expensive, in a better neighborhood. They could afford it, thanks to Walker's thriving business, but the timing had struck him as odd. Why the sudden urge to move from the home they'd built together? Then there were the small things, new clothes, expensive perfume, a sudden interest in yoga classes that required special outfits and equipment. Letha had always been image-conscious, but this felt different, more secretive. After dropping Emily off, Walker returned home to find Kyle getting ready for school. The teenager barely acknowledged his father's presence, grabbing his backpack and heading for the door. "Kyle, wait," Walker called out. "We need to talk." "About what?" Kyle's tone was defensive, his shoulders tense. "About your attitude lately. About your mother. About this family." Kyle's face flushed red. "There's nothing to talk about. Everything's fine. Is it?" Walker stepped closer to his son, noting how Kyle's eyes shifted away. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everyone in this house is keeping secrets." "Maybe you should ask Mom about secrets," Kyle muttered, then immediately looked like he regretted saying it. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. I'm late for school." Kyle bolted for the door, leaving Walker standing alone in the foyer of a house that suddenly felt more like a stage than a home. Walker spent the rest of the morning in his home office, ostensibly working on client files, but his mind kept returning to Kyle's parting comment. As a former Army intelligence officer, Walker had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming that something was very wrong with his family. He pulled out his laptop and began what he did best: investigation. Adrian Potts was 38, divorced, no children. He joined Letha's firm 8 months ago, right around the time she'd started suggesting they needed more space, a bigger house, a fresh start. The timeline was suspicious, but Walker needed more than coincidence. He opened a secure program he used for client work, one that could track digital footprints, and began mapping out patterns. Letha's credit card statements showed charges at restaurants Walker didn't recognize, shopping trips she'd never mentioned, and a concerning pattern of purchases at a boutique hotel downtown. His phone buzzed with a text from Letha, "Meeting running long. We'll be very late. Don't wait up." Walker stared at the message, noting the timestamp. It was barely noon. That evening, Walker ordered pizza for himself and Emily. Kyle had texted that he was eating at a friend's house, another recent development. As they sat in the dining room, Walker noticed Emily pushing her food around her plate, her appetite non-existent. "Emily, you've barely eaten anything today. Are you feeling sick?" "No, Daddy." She looked up at him with eyes far too serious for a 7-year-old. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. You can ask me anything. Do you love Mommy?" The question hit Walker like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that?" Emily's lower lip trembled. Because... She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind." Walker moved his chair closer to his daughter. "Emily, if something is bothering you, you can tell me. I'm here to protect you, to protect our family. But I can't help if I don't know what's wrong." Emily stared at her plate for a long moment, then whispered, "Sometimes I hear things at night. Things that make me scared." "What kind of things?" "Voices. In Mommy's room." "But you're supposed to be at work," and Kyle says. Emily clamped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with fear. Walker's blood ran cold. "Kyle says what, sweetheart?" "That I shouldn't tell you. That it would hurt your feelings." Walker forced his voice to remain calm, though inside he felt something dark and primal stirring. The same cold fury that had made him so effective in the military, that had helped him survive missions that broke other men. "Emily, you never have to keep secrets that make you scared. Especially not from me. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "But I don't want to make you sad, Daddy." Walker pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her close while his mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. His wife was having an affair. His son was covering for her. And his 7-year-old daughter was being forced to keep secrets that were eating her alive. "Emily," he said softly, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what you tell me, I will always love you, and I will always protect you. Can you remember that?" Emily nodded against his chest, and Walker made a silent promise to himself. Whatever was happening in his house, whatever betrayal his family was hiding, he would uncover the truth. And then he would make sure that those responsible paid for every moment of fear they'd put his daughter through. Walker Jackson had spent his career protecting others. Now, it was time to protect himself. Chapter 2. The Revelation. 3 days later, Letha announced she needed to attend a weekend conference in Chicago. Kyle would be staying at his friend Darren's house for the weekend, leaving Walker alone with Emily. As Walker watched his wife pack her overnight bag with unusual care, selecting outfits he'd never seen before, he felt the familiar weight of certainty settling in his chest. "It's a shame you can't come with me," Letha said, though her tone suggested relief rather than disappointment. "But someone needs to stay with Emily." "Of course," Walker replied evenly. "Have a safe trip." He kissed her goodbye at the door, noting how she stiffened slightly at his touch, how her perfume was different, more expensive, more sensual. As her car disappeared down the street, Walker turned to find Emily watching from the stairs, her small face etched with an expression far too knowing for a child her age. Friday evening passed quietly. Walker ordered Chinese takeout, and he and Emily watched movies on the couch. But as bedtime approached, Emily grew increasingly anxious, fidgeting with the hem of her pajamas and casting nervous glances toward her mother's bedroom. "Daddy," she said as Walker tucked her into bed, "will you leave your door open tonight?" "Of course, sweetheart. Is there something specific you're worried about?" Emily bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. "Sometimes, when Mommy's here, there are bad dreams. But they're not really dreams." Walker sat on the edge of her bed, his heart breaking for his daughter while rage built like a storm in his chest. "Emily, do you want to tell me about these dreams?" She shook her head quickly. "Kyle said if I tell, it would break up our family. He said you'd leave us." "Kyle is wrong," Walker said firmly. "I would never leave you, Emily. Never. But if something is scaring you, I need to know about it so I can make it stop." Emily studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Finally, she whispered, "Tomorrow, when Kyle's not here, I'll show you." Walker kissed her forehead, his mind already working through possibilities. "I'll be right here, sweetheart. You're safe." Saturday morning dawned gray and cold. Walker made pancakes while Emily sat at the kitchen counter, pushing them around her plate. She'd been unusually quiet since waking up, her eyes following Walker's every movement as if memorizing them. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "are you going to work today?" "No, sweetheart. I'm staying home with you." "Why?" "Because—" Emily slid off her stool and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. "Because I need to show you something. But first, I need to tell you something else." Walker turned off the stove and gave Emily his full attention. "Okay, I'm listening." Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Kyle knows about Mommy's secret. He helps her sometimes." "What kind of help?" "He tells her when you're coming home early. He listens to your phone calls. And Emily's voice broke. "He gets angry at me when I ask questions." The betrayal hit Walker like a physical blow. His own son, the boy he'd raised, taught to throw a football, helped with homework, was actively working against him. The cold fury that had been building for months crystallized into something harder, more focused. "Emily, I want you to know that what Kyle is doing is wrong. You're not supposed to keep secrets that make you scared or sad. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Are you mad at me?" "Never." Walker knelt in front of his daughter, gently wiping her tears. "I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell me. Now, what did you want to show me?" Emily took his hand, her small fingers trembling as she led him toward the master bedroom. Walker's chest tightened as they approached the door. He'd been sleeping in the guest room lately, claiming work stress was making him restless. "Mommy does her homework in the bathroom," Emily said, her voice matter of fact. "She sits on the floor with her computer and talks to someone. She thinks I don't know, but I can hear her through the wall." Walker's blood ran cold. Their master bathroom shared a wall with Emily's room. "What kind of things does she say?" "She talks about you, about how you don't understand her, about how she deserves better." Emily's voice grew smaller. "And she says mean things about me and Kyle sometimes. That we're complications." Walker's hands clenched into fists. Using their own bathroom as a private space to conduct an affair was bad enough, but to speak negatively about their children, to make Emily feel unwanted, was unforgivable. Emily, when does mommy usually do this homework? When you're supposed to be sleeping, or when you're out of town. Sometimes during the day, when Kyle and I are at school. Emily looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowledge. Daddy, is mommy going to leave us? Walker felt something break inside his chest. His 7-year-old daughter was living in constant fear of abandonment, while his wife conducted an affair mere feet from their children's bedrooms. The disrespect, the cruelty of it was staggering. Emily, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens between your mother and me, I will never let anything bad happen to you. You are the most important thing in my life. Do you believe me? Emily nodded, throwing her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you could ever know. As Walker held his daughter, he felt the last vestiges of the man he'd been. The trusting husband, the naive father, die a quiet death. In their place rose something harder, colder, more calculating. He thought of his military training, of the missions where mercy had been a luxury he couldn't afford, of the times when survival had required absolute ruthlessness. Letha Jackson had made a critical error. She turned their children into weapons against him, forced Emily to live in fear, and corrupted Kyle into becoming an accomplice. That was where she'd crossed the line from mere infidelity into something unforgivable. Emily, I need you to do something for me, Walker said, pulling back to look at his daughter. I need you to write down everything you remember about mommy's bathroom homework. Times, dates, things she said. Can you do that? Emily nodded solemnly. Will it help? Yes, sweetheart. It will help me protect you. As Emily went to get paper and crayons, Walker stepped into the master bathroom. He'd noticed Letha had been more possessive of this space lately, always closing the door, cleaning it herself instead of letting their housekeeper handle it. Now he understood why. He examined the room with professional eyes, noting the positioning, the acoustics, the sight lines. If Letha was conducting video calls from here, she'd need good lighting and minimal background noise. He tested the sound levels, confirming that conversation in this bathroom would indeed carry to Emily's room through the shared wall. His phone buzzed with a text from Letha. Conference is amazing. Learning so much. Miss you both. Walker stared at the message, noting the timestamp. According to his research, there was no marketing conference in Chicago this weekend. Letha was lying, and she wasn't even being careful about it anymore. He opened his laptop and began documenting everything Emily had told him, cross-referencing it with credit card statements, phone records, and travel patterns. The picture that emerged was damning. A months-long affair conducted with callous disregard for their children's well-being. But Walker needed more than evidence of infidelity. He needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal, identify all the players, and plan his response accordingly. Because this wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about a woman who traumatized their daughter and corrupted their son in service of her selfish desires. Walker Jackson had built his career on protecting people from threats they couldn't see coming. Now, it was time to become the threat that Letha and Adrian Potts would never see coming. Emily returned with her drawings and carefully written notes, her 7-year-old handwriting spelling out dates and times with heartbreaking precision. As Walker reviewed her documentation, he felt the final pieces of his old life fall away. The war for his family had begun, and Walker Jackson had no intention of losing. Chapter 3: The Investigation. Monday morning arrived with the pretense of normalcy. Letha returned from her conference with a fake tan and a guilty smile, regaling them with stories about marketing strategies and networking events that Walker knew were fabrications. Kyle watched his father carefully across the breakfast table, his teenage face a mask of poorly concealed anxiety. How was your weekend with Emily? Letha asked, buttering her toast with studied casualness. Enlightening, Walker replied, earning a sharp look from Kyle. We had some very interesting conversations. Emily, following the plan they'd discussed, remained quiet but kept her eyes on her father. Walker had spent Sunday preparing her for what was to come, explaining that they needed to be very careful and very smart about protecting their family. After everyone left for work and school, Walker began his real investigation. 20 years of military intelligence work had taught him that successful operations required thorough reconnaissance, careful planning, and patience. He would not move against Letha and Adrian until he had complete information. Walker's first stop was Adrian Potts' apartment complex. Using skills he'd honed tracking targets in Afghanistan, Walker conducted surveillance on the building, noting entry and exit patterns, security measures, and resident behaviors. Adrian lived in an upscale development downtown, the same area where Letha's credit card showed those mysterious hotel charges. Walker's phone contained tracking software he'd originally developed for client protection services. With a few modifications, it could monitor location data, call logs, and text messages. That evening, while Letha showered, Walker cloned her phone data onto his secure server. The results were devastating and illuminating in equal measure. Letha and Adrian had been communicating since her first day at the new job 8 months ago. The early messages were professional, but within weeks they'd escalated to explicit sexual content. Walker read through months of conversations where his wife had complained about their marriage, their children, and their life together with shocking viciousness. Walker has no imagination, she'd written. He thinks providing for us financially is the same as being a real husband. I need someone who understands passion. Emily is so needy lately, another message read. Sometimes I think we had kids too young. They're holding us back from really living. But the messages about Kyle were the most disturbing. Kyle knows about us, and he's fine with it. He actually said he thinks his father is boring and that I deserve to be happy. Smart kid, he gets it. Walker felt bile rise in his throat. Letha hadn't just corrupted Kyle. She'd made him an active participant in her deception. His 15-year-old son had been groomed into betraying his own father. The phone records revealed that Letha and Adrian spoke multiple times daily, often while Walker was in the same house. Credit card statements showed expensive dinners, hotel stays, and shopping trips that coincided with Walker's business travel. They'd been using his absence, his hard work providing for the family, as opportunities to conduct their affair. But the most damning evidence came from Letha's cloud storage account. Walker found hundreds of photos and videos, including intimate recordings made in their family bathroom, the same space Emily could hear from her bedroom. The violation was so complete, so intentional, that Walker felt something fundamental shift inside him. That night, as Letha slept beside him, or pretended to sleep, Walker lay awake planning. His military training had taught him that effective warfare required understanding your enemy's weaknesses, their support structures, and their escape routes. Letha and Adrian had made several critical errors that would facilitate their destruction. First, they documented everything electronically, creating a digital trail that would serve as irrefutable evidence. Second, they'd involved Kyle, creating a witness whose loyalty could be turned. Third, they traumatized Emily, giving Walker not just motivation, but moral justification for extreme measures. Over the next week, Walker built comprehensive profiles on both targets. Adrian Potts was ambitious but careless, recently divorced due to his own infidelity, and deeply in debt despite his impressive salary. He'd been embezzling small amounts from client accounts to fund his lifestyle, something Letha either didn't know or chose to ignore. Walker also discovered that Adrian had a history of targeting married women at his previous jobs, a pattern that suggested this wasn't love, but predatory behavior. Armed with this information, Walker began planning phase 2 of his operation. Friday evening, Walker announced he would be traveling to Portland for a client meeting the following week. "How long will you be gone?" Letha asked, though her excitement was poorly concealed. 3 days, Monday through Wednesday. Walker watched Kyle's reaction carefully. His son immediately reached for his phone, no doubt planning to share this intelligence with his mother. The betrayal stung, but it also provided opportunity. That weekend, Walker had a difficult conversation with Emily about what was going to happen to their family. He explained that Mommy had been lying to them, that she had been talking to another man in ways that wives weren't supposed to, and that their family would need to change. "Will you still be my daddy?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Always," Walker promised. but we might need to live in a different house, just you and me. Would that be okay? Emily considered this seriously. Will I still see Kyle? Walker's jaw tightened. Kyle has some decisions to make about who he wants to be. But no matter what, I will always take care of you. On Sunday night, Walker made his final preparations. He'd already moved their important assets to accounts Letha couldn't access, documented her affair with overwhelming evidence, and consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict cases involving child custody. But those were just legal maneuvers. Walker's real plan was something else entirely, a form of justice that would ensure Letha and Adrian paid for every moment of fear they'd put Emily through, every lie they'd told, every violation of trust they'd committed. As Walker packed his bag for the fake business trip, Letha could barely contain her anticipation. "I'll miss you," she said, kissing him goodbye with lips that had been on another man. "I'm sure you will," Walker replied, knowing it would be the last lie she ever told him. 20 minutes after leaving the house, Walker doubled back and parked in a surveillance position where he could monitor his own home. Within an hour, Kyle had left for school, and 30 minutes after that, Adrian Potts' BMW pulled into Walker's driveway. Walker watched his wife welcome her lover into their home, into their bed, and felt the last of his mercy die. He'd given Letha every opportunity to come clean, to show remorse, to consider their children's well-being. Instead, she'd chosen to escalate her betrayal. As Walker photographed Adrian entering his house, he thought about Emily's scared voice asking if Mommy was going to leave them. Letha already had left them in every way that mattered. Now, Walker would simply make that abandonment official and ensure she paid an appropriate price for the damage she'd caused. The game was about to begin, and Walker Jackson played to win. Chapter 4. The Professional. Walker Jackson had always been underestimated, and he'd learned to use that to his advantage. To his neighbors, he was a mild-mannered security consultant who worked from home and coached Emily's soccer team. To his clients, he was a thorough professional who provided discreet background checks and threat assessments for Denver's elite. What they didn't know was that Walker's security consulting firm was a carefully constructed front for much more sophisticated operations. His real clients included federal agencies, multinational corporations, and individuals who needed problems solved quietly and permanently. The skills Walker had developed during 2 decades of military intelligence work, surveillance, psychological warfare, evidence fabrication, and strategic elimination of threats, translated perfectly to the private sector. His official business handled routine security clearances and background checks. His unofficial business handled situations where traditional legal remedies were insufficient. 3 years earlier, Walker had helped a Fortune 500 CEO remove a board member who was selling company secrets to competitors. The operation had been surgical, planted evidence of tax evasion, fabricated connections to organized crime, and a carefully orchestrated scandal that destroyed the man's reputation so thoroughly that he'd left the country in disgrace. 2 years ago, Walker had assisted a federal judge whose daughter was being stalked by a wealthy ex-boyfriend with political connections. The stalker had disappeared one night after receiving a video of his own children playing in their supposed secure private school. He'd moved to Europe and never contacted the judge's daughter again. Walker's most recent case had involved a pharmaceutical executive who'd been selling diluted cancer medications to children's hospitals. The executive had suffered a mysterious breakdown that led to full confession, disgrace, and a lifetime prison sentence. His assets had been distributed to the families of children who died due to his greed. Walker didn't consider himself a vigilante or a criminal. He was a surgeon removing cancerous growths from society, people who used wealth, power, or privilege to harm others without consequence. Each operation was meticulously planned, legally untraceable, and psychologically devastating to the target. Now, he would apply these skills to the most personal case of his career. That Monday evening, while Letha believed him to be in Portland, Walker was actually in a rented office space across town, coordinating with the team he'd assembled for this operation. Byron Pugh was a former Marine sniper who now worked as a private investigator. Kareem Pineda was a computer specialist who could penetrate any digital system. Chance Tanner was a financial analyst who specialized in asset recovery and economic warfare. Target profiles are complete, Byron reported, laying out surveillance photos on the conference table. Adrian Potts follows predictable patterns. Same coffee shop every morning, same gym 3 times a week, same bar every Friday. He's careless with personal security. Kareem pulled up data on his laptop. His financial situation is worse than we initially thought. He's leveraged to the limit on credit cards, has a second mortgage on his apartment, and his ex-wife is demanding increased alimony payments. He's definitely skimming from client accounts to stay afloat. Chance nodded approvingly. Financial pressure makes people stupid. We can use that. Walker studied the assembled intelligence. What about weaknesses? Psychological vulnerabilities? Classic narcissist, Byron replied. Believes he's smarter than everyone around him. Has a history of leaving digital evidence because he thinks he's untouchable. The pattern with your wife isn't unique. He's done this before. Elaborate. Kareem pulled up a series of photos and documents. Adrian Potts has targeted married women at 3 previous jobs. Always the same pattern. Professional relationship escalates to emotional affair, then sexual relationship. Then he convinces them to leave their husbands for him. Once they're divorced and available, he loses interest and moves on. Walker felt cold fury settle in his chest. So Letha isn't special to him. She's just another mark. Exactly. He's a predator who targets financially stable married women. He uses them for sex, money, and professional advancement, then discards them once they've outlived their usefulness. The revelation added another layer to Walker's rage. Letha wasn't just betraying their family for love. She was being manipulated by a sociopath who saw her as a temporary resource to exploit. What's his endgame with Letha? Walker asked. Byron consulted his notes. Based on his previous patterns, he'll string her along until she divorces you and give him access to half your assets. He'll probably convince her to invest in some scheme he's running, drain her financially, then disappear when someone more attractive comes along. Walker thought about Emily's fearful questions, about Kyle's misguided loyalty, about the months of lies and manipulation. Adrian Potts wasn't just destroying Walker's marriage. He was systematically dismantling Walker's family for profit. Timeline, Walker asked. He's accelerating, Chance reported. Letha has been researching divorce attorneys online. She's also been looking at apartments in Adrian's neighborhood and investigating private schools for Emily. She's planning her exit strategy. The irony wasn't lost on Walker. Letha was planning to take Emily away from the father who loved her and place her in the hands of a man who saw children as complications. Over Walker's dead body. Gentlemen, Walker said, his voice taking on the tone he'd used when briefing special operations teams in Afghanistan, we have a complex target set with multiple objectives. Primary goal is the complete destruction of Adrian Potts, financial, professional, and social. Secondary goal is ensuring Letha Jackson faces appropriate consequences for child endangerment and psychological abuse. Tertiary goal is protecting Emily Jackson from further trauma. Rules of engagement? Byron asked. No physical violence unless absolutely necessary for defensive purposes. No illegal activities that can be traced back to us. Everything must appear to be natural consequences of their own actions. Walker paused, his expression hardening. But within those parameters, there are no limits. I want them destroyed so thoroughly that they serve as a warning to anyone who might consider harming my daughter. Kareem grinned. I like this job already. Over the next 2 hours, Walker outlined a multi-phase operation that would systematically dismantle Adrian and Letha's lives while protecting Emily and giving Kyle one final chance to choose the right side. Phase 1 would involve exposing Adrian's embezzlement to his firm and the authorities, destroying his career and creating legal jeopardy that would make him radioactive to Letha. Phase 2 would focus on Letha herself, using her own documented statements and actions to build an irrefutable case for sole custody of Emily while ensuring she lost access to any marital assets. Phase 3 would be psychological warfare, using their own guilt, paranoia, and mutual distrust to turn Adrian and Letha against each other. Phase 4 would be the endgame. Complete social and financial ruin for both targets, with Walker emerging as the clearly innocent victim of their cruelty. "What about your son?" Byron asked carefully. Walker's face went cold. "Kyle has chosen his side. He'll get one opportunity to switch teams when the truth comes out. If he continues to support his mother after seeing the evidence of what she's done to Emily, then he's made his choice. And if he doesn't take the opportunity," Walker thought about his son, the boy he taught to fish, help with homework, cheered for at basketball games. The same boy who is now actively helping destroy their family. "Then Kyle will learn that choices have consequences. I won't abandon him, but he'll have to earn his way back into my trust. And he'll do it while watching what happens to people who betray me." As the meeting concluded, Walker felt the familiar calm that came before a complex operation. Everything was in motion now. By the time Letha realized what was happening, it would be too late to stop it. Walker's phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Missing you. Hope Portland is going well. Emily asks about you constantly." Walker almost laughed at the irony. Emily wasn't asking about him. She was worried about what would happen when Mommy's lies finally caught up with her. But that worry would end soon. Walker Jackson was coming home, and he was bringing justice with him. Chapter 5. Gathering the Storm. When Walker returned from his business trip, he found his house transformed into a stage set for deception. Fresh flowers filled the vases. Letha had cooked his favorite meal, and the atmosphere practically hummed with artificial domesticity. "Welcome home." Letha greeted him with an enthusiastic kiss, her performance flawless except for the guilt in her eyes. "How was Portland?" "Productive," Walker replied, noting how Kyle watched the interaction from the doorway with poorly concealed anxiety. "Very productive." Emily ran to him with genuine excitement, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy, I missed you so much." "I missed you too, sweetheart." Walker lifted his daughter, catching Letha's flash of irritation at Emily's obvious preference for her father. "Did you have fun while I was gone?" "Mommy had friends over," Emily said innocently. "But Kyle said I had to stay in my room." Walker saw Kyle's face flush red, while Letha forced a bright smile. "Just some colleagues from work. You know how boring adult conversations can be." That evening, while Letha showered, Walker reviewed the intelligence his team had gathered during his absence. Kareem had installed sophisticated monitoring equipment throughout the house, capturing everything that had occurred during Walker's absence. The evidence was damning. Adrian had spent 2 full days in Walker's home, in Walker's bed, eating Walker's food. They discussed their future together, including plans to convince Emily that Walker was unstable and unsuitable for custody. Most disturbingly, they talked about Kyle as an asset to be managed rather than a child to be protected. "The kid's totally on board," Adrian had said, unaware he was being recorded. "Hates his old man, thinks I'm cool. He'll testify that Walker was never around, never paid attention to the family." Perfect character witness. "What about Emily?" Letha had asked. "Kids adapt. She'll forget about Daddy soon enough when she sees how much better life can be." Walker saved that recording to a secure server. When the custody hearing came, a judge would hear Adrian discussing his plans to erase Emily's father from her life. But Walker's most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source. Byron surveillance had captured a heated argument between Adrian and an unknown woman in the parking lot of Adrian's apartment complex. Facial recognition identified her as Hillary Daniel, Adrian's ex-wife. "He owes me $30,000 in back alimony," Hillary had told Byron when he'd approached her as a private investigator hired by concerned parties to investigate Adrian's finances. "The bastard claims he's broke, but I know he's hiding money somewhere. He always is." Hillary had been more than happy to provide information about her ex-husband's financial crimes, his history of targeting married women, and his pattern of manipulation and abandonment. She'd also mentioned that Adrian had been bragging about his current score, a wealthy consultant's wife who was planning to leave her husband. "He's already spending her money," Hillary had revealed. "New clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Vegas he couldn't afford otherwise. He thinks he's hit the jackpot." Walker realized that Adrian had been using Letha's credit cards to fund their affair, technically theft, since the cards were in Walker's name and unauthorized by him. Another felony to add to the growing list. More importantly, Hillary had agreed to help expose Adrian's crimes in exchange for Byron's assistance in recovering her stolen alimony payments. She had financial records, photographs, and documented evidence of Adrian's embezzlement schemes dating back years. By Thursday, Walker had assembled a comprehensive dossier that would destroy Adrian Potts personally, professionally, and legally. But he needed to coordinate the timing carefully to maximize psychological impact while protecting Emily from collateral damage. That evening, Walker had a carefully scripted conversation with Kyle. "Son, we need to talk about your mother." Kyle's defensive walls went up immediately. "What about her?" "I think you know more about what's been happening in this house than you're letting on." Walker kept his voice calm, non-accusatory. "I think you've been put in an impossible position, and I want to help you." "I don't know what you're talking about." Walker pulled out his tablet and showed Kyle a single photograph. Adrian's car in their driveway, while Walker was supposedly in Portland. Kyle's face went white. "Dad, I can explain." "Kyle, I need you to listen very carefully. Your mother is having an affair with Adrian Potts. She's been using our family home to conduct this relationship. She's been lying to all of us for months, and she's been planning to take Emily away from me." Kyle started to protest, but Walker held up a hand. "I know she's told you that I'm the problem, that I don't understand her, that she deserves better. She's also told you that keeping her secrets is protecting our family. But Kyle, I need you to understand something. The man your mother is involved with is not who she thinks he is." Walker showed Kyle the financial records Hillary had provided, the evidence of Adrian's pattern with other married women, and the recordings of Adrian discussing Kyle and Emily as pawns to be manipulated. "He doesn't care about you, your mother, or your sister," Walker said quietly. "You're all just resources to him, and when he's finished using your mother, he'll disappear and leave all of us to deal with the wreckage." Kyle stared at the evidence, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally understanding. "Mom doesn't know about this. Your mother knows what she wants to know. She's so invested in the fantasy that she's not seeing the reality." Walker leaned forward. "Kyle, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to protect our family and make sure Emily never has to be afraid again. But I need to know, are you willing to help me protect your sister?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd learned. Finally, he looked up with tears in his eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry. I thought Mom said you didn't love us anymore, that you were always working, always distant. She said Adrian made her happy in ways you never could." "Kyle, I've been working so hard because I wanted to provide for this family. I wanted to give you and Emily every opportunity. But I should have been paying more attention to what was happening at home. That's on me. What do you need me to do?" Walker felt a surge of relief. His son was still salvageable. "I need you to act normal around your mother until this is over. Don't let her know that you know the truth about Adrian. Can you do that?" Kyle nodded, his jaw set with determination that reminded Walker of himself at that age. "What's going to happen to Mom?" "Your mother made choices, Kyle. Now she has to live with the consequences. But you and Emily, you're my priority. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're both safe." As Kyle went to his room to process everything he'd learned, Walker felt a piece of his family falling back into place. His son had been manipulated and lied to, but underneath the confusion and misguided loyalty, Kyle was still a good kid who wanted to protect his family. Now Walker had to make sure that when everything came crashing down, Emily and Kyle would be standing safely beside him while Letha and Adrian faced the ruins of their own making. The storm was gathering, and Walker Jackson controlled the weather. Chapter 6. The Trap is Set. Friday evening brought another of Letha's spontaneous work dinners. Walker watched her prepare for the evening with meticulous care. New dress, expensive perfume, jewelry he'd bought her for their anniversary, being worn for another man. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing him goodbye with practiced deception. "This client is really high maintenance." "I'm sure they are," Walker replied, knowing that Adrian was indeed high maintenance, just not in the way Letha intended. After Letha left, Walker gathered Emily and Kyle in the living room. It was time for the final phase of preparation. "Kids, I need to tell you something important about what's going to happen this weekend." Emily curled up against his side while Kyle sat forward, alert and ready. Since their conversation 2 days earlier, Kyle had been a different person, more mature, more protective of Emily, and visibly angry at how he'd been manipulated. Sunday, some things are going to change in our family, Walker continued. People are going to learn the truth about what's been happening here, and it's going to be very difficult for everyone. Will Mommy be in trouble? Emily asked in a small voice. Walker chose his words carefully. Mommy made some choices that hurt our family, sweetheart. When grown-ups make bad choices, there are consequences. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and you're going to be safe no matter what happens. Emily nodded solemnly while Kyle reached over to squeeze her hand. The bond between the siblings had strengthened considerably since Kyle learned the truth about his mother's affair. What do you need us to do? Kyle asked. Tomorrow is Saturday. Your mother will probably want to spend time with both of you. She's going to be feeling guilty about what she's been doing, so she might be extra attentive. I want you both to be polite and normal, but you don't have to pretend to be happy if you're not. What about Sunday? Kyle pressed. Sunday, we're going to have some visitors. People who need to see our family situation for themselves. Emily, do you remember the nice judge we talked about? The one who helps decide where children should live. Emily nodded. Walker had prepared her carefully for the custody evaluation that would take place, explaining that sometimes judges needed to make sure children were safe and happy. She's going to come here with some other people, and they're going to ask you questions about how you feel living here. I want you to tell them the truth about everything, about being scared at night, about the secrets you were told to keep, about anything that made you worried or sad. Can you do that? Will it help? Emily asked. Yes, sweetheart. It will help make sure you never have to be scared in your own home again. Kyle looked troubled. Dad, what about Mom? I know she lied to us, but she's still our mother. Walker had been dreading this question, but Kyle deserved an honest answer. Kyle, your mother's going to face consequences for her choices. She's going to lose things that were important to her. But here's what I need you to understand. Everything that happens to her is the result of what she chose to do. You didn't cause it, Emily didn't cause it, and I didn't cause it. Your mother caused it when she decided to put her affair ahead of her children's well-being. Will we ever see her again? Emily asked. I don't know, sweetheart. That will depend on whether your mother can learn from her mistakes and become the kind of person who puts her children first. Right now, she's not that person. You don't understand. Adrian was helping us. He was going to make sure Emily and I were financially secure when Letha stopped herself, realizing what she'd almost admitted. When you what, Letha? When you left me and took my daughter to live with a man who embezzles money from cancer charities. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Judge Blake raised her eyebrows at this new information. Letha, are you there? Walker, please. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand about our marriage, about what I need about. Letha, I'm here with Judge Blake from Family Court, representatives from Child Services, and FBI agents investigating Adrian's crimes. If you have something to say about our marriage or our children, this would be an excellent time to say it. Another long silence. Then, Letha's voice, smaller and more desperate. You planned this. You knew about Adrian and you set him up. No, Letha. Adrian set himself up when he decided to steal money from his clients. You set yourself up when you decided to conduct an affair in our family bathroom, while our daughter tried to sleep next door. I simply documented the evidence and made sure the appropriate authorities were informed. What about Emily? What about our family? Walker looked at his daughter, who was coloring at the kitchen table while Kyle helped her. Both children finally relaxed and peaceful in their own home. Emily is fine, Letha. She's safe. She's not scared anymore. And she's surrounded by people who put her welfare ahead of their own selfish desires. As for our family, you destroyed that when you chose Adrian over your children. Walker, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... Letha, there's no we anymore. You're going to be arrested as an accessory to Adrian's financial crimes. You're going to lose custody of Emily because you've demonstrated that you're willing to traumatize her to facilitate your affair. And you're going to discover that the man you threw your family away for never loved you. He was just using you for money and sex until something better came along. Judge Blake gestured for Walker to wrap up the call. Letha, I suggest you hire a good attorney. You're going to need one. Don't come to this house, don't contact Emily, and don't contact Kyle unless your lawyer advises it. We'll communicate through our attorneys from now on. Walker ended the call to find everyone in the room staring at him. Mr. Jackson, Judge Blake said carefully, that was remarkably well orchestrated. Your Honor, I spent 20 years in military intelligence. When someone threatens my family, I respond with all available resources. And Adrian Potts? How did you discover his criminal activities? I ran a standard background check as part of documenting my wife's affair. His embezzlement came to light during that investigation. I felt obligated to report it to the appropriate authorities. Byron Pugh, Walker's former Marine colleague, stepped out of the kitchen where he'd been photographing evidence. Your Honor, Mr. Potts has been stealing from children's cancer research funds for over 2 years. Mrs. Jackson's affair provided him with additional resources, but his criminal activity predates their relationship. Judge Blake shook her head in disgust. Mr. Jackson, based on what I've seen today, I'm prepared to grant you emergency temporary custody of Emily, with supervised visitation only for your wife, pending further evaluation. Emily looked up from her coloring. Does that mean I don't have to be scared anymore? No, sweetheart, Judge Blake replied. You don't have to be scared anymore. As the officials prepared to leave, Walker felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. His family was safe, but the cost had been tremendous. Letha would face criminal charges, social disgrace, and the loss of her children. Adrian would spend years in federal prison. But Emily was smiling for the first time in months, and Kyle was standing taller, no longer burdened by secrets and lies. Sometimes, Walker reflected, justice required the complete destruction of those who chose evil over good. And Walker Jackson had never been more committed to justice than when it came to protecting his children. The war was far from over, but the first major battle had been decisively won. Chapter 8. The Dominoes Fall. Monday morning brought the sound of news vans setting up outside Walker's house. The arrest of Adrian Potts for embezzling from children's cancer funds had made headlines, and his connection to a prominent marketing firm had turned a financial crime story into a human interest scandal. Walker watched from his office window as reporters interviewed neighbors about the perfect family next door that had harbored such darkness. He'd anticipated the media attention and prepared for it carefully. At 9 a.m., Walker's attorney, Harry Sellers, arrived for their scheduled meeting. The custody hearing is scheduled for Thursday, Harry reported. Letha's attorney is arguing that her affair doesn't constitute child endangerment and that you've orchestrated a malicious prosecution to gain custody advantage. What's her attorney's strategy? They're claiming that you manipulated the evidence, that Adrian was coerced into confessing, and that your military background makes you an unstable influence on the children. Harry smiled grimly. It's a desperate defense, but they have to try something. Walker pulled out a thick folder. Then perhaps they should see this. The folder contained additional evidence Walker had held in reserve. Recordings of Letha and Adrian explicitly discussing how to alienate Emily from her father. Financial records showing they'd already begun spending Walker's money on apartment deposits and private school applications. And most damning of all, a video recording of Adrian bragging to his friends about hitting the jackpot with a rich consultant's wife. Walker, this is devastating, Harry said, reviewing the materials. With this evidence, Letha won't just lose custody. She could face charges for conspiracy to commit parental alienation. That's the idea. At 2 p.m., Walker received a call from his former colleague Byron Pugh. Adrian's not handling prison well, Byron reported. He's claiming that everything was Letha's idea, that she seduced him into the affair and convinced him to steal money to fund their future together. Walker wasn't surprised. Men like Adrian always blamed women when their schemes collapsed. Is anyone believing him? The prosecutors aren't buying it. They have evidence of his previous embezzlement schemes dating back years. But Letha's attorney might try to use his statements to minimize her culpability. Let them try. I have recordings of Letha actively participating in planning Emily's alienation from me. Adrian's lies won't help her. That evening, Walker sat down with Emily and Kyle for dinner at their kitchen table, the first peaceful family meal they'd shared in months. Dad, kids at school are asking questions about the news stories, Kyle said. How should I handle it? Tell them the truth. Your mother made some bad choices. She got involved with a bad man, and now she's facing the consequences. You and Emily are safe now, and that's what matters. Emily looked up from her macaroni and cheese. Daddy, will Mommy go to jail? The conversation was painful, but necessary. Walker needed his children to understand that the dissolution of their family wasn't random or cruel. It was the logical consequence of Letha's choices. Saturday unfolded exactly as Walker had predicted. Letha returned home with expensive gifts for the children and an abundance of forced cheerfulness. She insisted on taking them shopping, cooking their favorite meals, and spending quality time together that felt more like a performance than genuine family bonding. Emily played along politely, but stayed close to Walker whenever possible. Kyle was civil but distant, his new understanding of his mother's manipulation making her attention feel hollow and manipulative. Walker spent the day making final preparations. His legal team was standing by with completed divorce papers, custody motions, and evidence packages. His financial advisor had secured all marital assets and accounts that only Walker could access. His security team had documented months of Letha's deception and Adrian's criminal activity. Most importantly, Walker had coordinated with Family Court Services to conduct an emergency custody evaluation based on evidence of emotional abuse and child endangerment. The evaluation would take place Sunday afternoon, giving the court professionals an opportunity to see the family dynamics firsthand before Letha had time to craft a defense. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, matching Walker's mood as he watched Letha prepare for another work commitment. I have to meet with Adrian about the Morrison project, she announced, not even bothering to maintain the pretense that Adrian was just a colleague anymore. I'm sure you do, Walker replied. Take your time. Take all the time you need. Letha looked at him sharply, something in his tone setting off alarm bells. What's that supposed to mean? It means that I hope you and Adrian have a very productive meeting. I hope you discuss all the plans you've been making together. For the first time in months, Letha looked genuinely afraid. Walker, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I know everything, Letha. About Adrian, about the affair, about the lies, about your plans to take Emily away from me. I know all of it. Letha's face went white, then red, then calculating. You're being paranoid. Adrian and I are just... Letha, stop. Walker's voice was quiet but filled with such cold authority that Letha actually stepped backward. We both know what you've been doing. The question now is what you're going to do about it. What do you want? Letha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I want you to go meet with Adrian. I want you to discuss your future plans together. And I want you to think very carefully about what kind of mother abandons her daughter's emotional needs to pursue an affair with a man who sees children as complications. Letha grabbed her purse and keys with shaking hands. This isn't over, Walker. No, Walker agreed. It's not. But it will be very soon. As Letha's car disappeared down the street, Walker turned to find Emily and Kyle watching from the stairs. Is today the day, Dad? Kyle asked. Yes, son. Today is the day everything changes. Walker gathered his children close, knowing that in a few hours, their family would never be the same. But also knowing that for the first time in months, Emily would go to sleep without fear, and Kyle would understand the difference between loyalty and enabling. The trap was set, the evidence was overwhelming, and Walker Jackson was ready to remind everyone why he'd never lost a war. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. At precisely 2 p.m., 3 black sedans pulled into Walker's driveway. The first car carried Judge Evelyn Blake, who would be conducting the emergency custody evaluation. The second carried representatives from Colorado Child Protective Services. The third carried 2 FBI agents investigating financial crimes in the marketing industry. Walker had choreographed this moment carefully. While Letha was at Adrian's apartment, believing she was safe in her secret world, the real world was about to crash down around both of them. Mr. Jackson, Judge Blake extended her hand as she approached the front door. Thank you for accommodating this emergency evaluation. I understand there are serious concerns about child endangerment. Your Honor, I appreciate you taking this matter seriously. My daughter has been living in fear in her own home for months. As the officials entered, Walker noticed Kyle take Emily's hand, positioning himself protectively beside his sister. The siblings had grown closer since learning the truth, united in their need to protect each other from the chaos their mother had created. Judge Blake, a stern woman in her 50s with kind eyes, knelt to Emily's level. "Hello, Emily. I'm Judge Blake. I'm here to make sure you're safe and happy. Is it okay if we talk?" Emily nodded, looking to Walker for reassurance. "Daddy says you help children who are scared." "That's right, sweetheart. Can you tell me about times when you've been scared here at home?" What followed was heartbreaking and damning. Emily, with the clarity that only children possess, described months of whispered conversations that kept her awake, strange men's voices in her mother's room, and a fear that her family was going to break apart. She told the judge about being forced to keep secrets that made her stomach hurt, about her brother's anger and confusion, and about feeling safest when her father was home. Kyle's testimony was even more devastating. As a teenager, he could articulate the psychological manipulation he'd endured, the way his mother had positioned him as a weapon against his father, and the guilt he'd felt for betraying the one parent who'd actually put the children's welfare first. "She told me Dad didn't love us anymore," Kyle said, his voice breaking. "She said he was just staying for the money and that we'd be better off without him. She made me believe that keeping her secrets was protecting Emily. But Emily was getting more scared every day, and I didn't know what to do." Judge Blake's expression grew more serious with each revelation. "Kyle, did your mother ever ask you to lie about your father's behavior or character?" "Yes, ma'am. She wanted me to tell people that Dad was never home, that he ignored us, that he had anger problems. None of it was true, but she said it would help her get custody of Emily." The child services representatives took detailed notes while photographing Emily's bedroom, specifically documenting how the sound carried from the master bathroom, where Letha had conducted her affairs. The evidence of deliberate emotional abuse was overwhelming. At 3:30 p.m., Walker's phone rang. Letha's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Judge Blake instructed, "but put on speaker." "Hello, Letha." "Walker, what the hell is going on?" "There are FBI agents at Adrian's apartment. They're arresting him for embezzlement and fraud." Walker met Judge Blake's eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that, Letha. Where are you?" "I'm at the police station. They want to question me about financial irregularities at my company." "Walker, you have to help me. This is all some kind of mistake." "Is it?" Walker's voice was calm, controlled. "Because I have evidence that Adrian has been using credit cards in my name without authorization." "That's theft, Letha." Walker had been dreading this question, but knew he had to answer honestly. "I don't know, sweetheart. That will depend on what the judge decides. But I want you to understand that whatever happens to Mommy is because of choices she made, not because of anything you did wrong." "I know," Emily said solemnly. "Judge Blake explained that to me. She said sometimes grown-ups make bad choices and have to go to timeout, but it's not the children's fault." Kyle reached over and ruffled his sister's hair. "That's right, Em. And Dad and I are going to make sure you never have to worry about grown-up problems again." Walker felt a surge of pride watching Kyle step into his role as protective big brother. The crisis had forced Kyle to mature quickly, but it had also revealed the young man of character Walker had always hoped his son would become. Wednesday brought more devastating news for Letha's defense. Adrian's ex-wife, Hillary Daniel, had provided prosecutors with evidence that Adrian had been planning to defraud Letha from the beginning. He'd approached Hillary weeks before his arrest, bragging about his long con on a wealthy married woman who was going to fund his escape from debt. "He told me he was just waiting for her to divorce her husband and get half his assets," Hillary had testified. "Then he was going to convince her to invest in some fake business venture, disappear with the money." He called her the perfect mark, financially naive and emotionally desperate. The revelation that Adrian had never loved Letha, that she destroyed her family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a source of income, added psychological devastation to her legal troubles. Thursday morning arrived with Walker, Kyle, and Emily preparing for the custody hearing that would determine their family's future. "Remember," Walker told his children, "just tell the truth about how you feel and what you've experienced. The judge needs to understand what we've all been through." Judge Blake's courtroom was packed with reporters, social workers, and legal observers. The case had become a referendum on parental responsibility and the protection of children from selfish adult behavior. Letha's attorney argued that Walker had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up, that his military background made him controlling and manipulative, and that children belonged with their mothers regardless of temporary lapses in judgment. Walker's attorney systematically destroyed each argument with evidence. He showed that Walker had only documented crimes that were already occurring, that his military service involved protecting innocents rather than harming them, and that Letha's temporary lapse had involved months of psychological abuse directed at a 7-year-old child. When Emily testified via closed-circuit television from the judge's chambers, her simple honesty was devastating. "I was scared all the time," she told Judge Blake. "I didn't understand why Mommy was always whispering to strange men, why she got angry when I asked questions, and why Kyle was so sad. I just wanted my family to be normal again." Kyle's testimony was equally powerful. As a teenager, he could articulate the manipulation he'd endured and the relief he felt when the truth finally came out. "My mother turned me into a weapon against my father," Kyle said. "She made me believe that protecting her secrets was protecting our family. But she was actually destroying our family, and I was helping her do it without understanding what was happening." The coup de grace came when Walker played the recording of Adrian discussing Emily and Kyle as complications to be managed rather than children to be protected. Judge Blake's verdict was swift and comprehensive. Walker was granted sole custody of Emily, with Letha's visitation rights suspended pending completion of parental fitness evaluations and psychological counseling. Kyle, as a minor but old enough to express preference, chose to remain with his father. But Judge Blake wasn't finished. "Mrs. Jackson," she said, addressing Letha directly, "you have committed one of the most egregious violations of parental responsibility I've seen in 20 years on this bench. You deliberately exposed your minor daughter to psychological trauma to facilitate an extramarital affair. You corrupted your teenage son into becoming an accomplice in deception and betrayal. And you plan to remove both children from their father based on fabricated allegations of unfitness." Letha sat stone-faced as Judge Blake continued. "Your actions constitute child emotional abuse, conspiracy to commit parental alienation, and accessory to financial fraud. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Until such time as you can demonstrate genuine remorse and undergo extensive psychological rehabilitation, you are prohibited from unsupervised contact with either child." As the courtroom cleared, Walker felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost to everyone involved had been enormous. Emily and Kyle would grow up without their mother unless Letha chose to do the hard work of becoming the parent they deserved. Adrian would spend years in federal prison, his life destroyed by his own greed and predatory behavior. But Walker's children were safe, the truth had been revealed, and the family he'd fought to protect was finally free from fear. The war was over, and Walker Jackson had won. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months after the custody hearing, Walker stood in his kitchen making pancakes, while Emily helped measure ingredients and Kyle set the table. The morning routine had become a sacred ritual in their household, a daily affirmation that they were a real family, not the performance they'd been living for so long. "Dad, can we invite Uncle Byron for dinner this weekend?" Emily asked, stirring the batter with intense concentration. "I want to show him my science project." "Of course, sweetheart. Uncle Byron loves your science projects." Byron Pugh had become a regular presence in their lives, a surrogate uncle who helped fill the void left by extended family members who'd chosen Letha's side in the divorce. Walker hadn't minded losing fair-weather relatives who couldn't understand why he'd fought so hard to protect his children. Kyle looked up from arranging silverware. "Dad, I got accepted to the engineering program at Colorado State. Full scholarship." Walker felt a surge of pride. Kyle had channeled his guilt and anger over the family crisis into academic achievement, earning straight A's and impressive SAT scores that attracted attention from several universities. "That's fantastic, son. I'm proud of you." It's because of everything you taught me about integrity and taking responsibility for my actions. I won't make the same mistakes Mom made. Walker placed a gentle hand on Kyle's shoulder. Kyle, you're not responsible for your mother's choices. You were manipulated by an adult who should have protected you instead of using you. The fact that you learned from the experience and grew stronger shows what kind of man you're becoming. Emily looked up from her pancake duties. Kyle's the best big brother ever. He helps me with homework and teaches me to throw footballs and never lies to me about anything. The bond between the siblings had become unbreakable. Kyle had appointed himself Emily's protector and had taken that role seriously, becoming the stable male figure she needed while Walker worked to rebuild their family's financial and emotional security. Walker's business had actually grown during the crisis. The media attention surrounding his methodical takedown of Adrian Potts had attracted clients who needed someone capable of handling complex, high-stakes situations with surgical precision. Walker now employed a team of investigators, analysts, and security specialists who helped protect families and businesses from predators like Adrian. At 10 a.m., Walker's attorney called with an update on Letha's situation. She pled guilty to accessory charges in Adrian's embezzlement case, Harry reported. 2 years probation, community service, and full restitution to the victims. The judge was lenient because she cooperated with prosecution and showed genuine remorse. In the custody situation, she's completed 6 months of court-ordered therapy and wants to petition for supervised visitation with Emily. Her therapist says she's made significant progress in understanding how her actions harmed the children. Walker considered this carefully. Emily had occasionally asked about her mother, usually wondering if Letha was safe and whether she still loved her children. Walker had answered honestly. Letha was safe, she did love Emily and Kyle, but she'd made terrible choices that hurt everyone. What do you recommend? I think supervised visits might be appropriate if Emily wants them. Your daughter needs to understand that her mother's absence isn't her fault, and she needs the opportunity to develop her own relationship with Letha based on who Letha becomes, not who she was. I'll talk to Emily and Kyle about it. Their feelings are what matter most. That evening, Walker had a careful conversation with his children about their mother's situation. Kids, your mother has been working with doctors to understand why she made the choices she did. She's asked if she can visit with Emily sometimes, with a social worker present to make sure everyone feels safe. Emily considered this seriously. Will she try to take me away from you again? No, sweetheart. The judge made it very clear that you live with me, and that won't change. These visits would just be a chance for you to talk to your mother if you want to. What about Kyle? Emily asked. Can he come too? Kyle looked uncomfortable. I don't think I'm ready to see Mom yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Walker respected his son's decision. Kyle's betrayal had run deeper because he was old enough to understand what he was being asked to do. His healing process would take longer and might never be complete. Emily, you don't have to decide right now. But if you do want to see your mother, Kyle and I will support you completely. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Can I think about it? Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. 2 weeks later, Emily decided she wanted to meet with her mother. The supervised visit took place at a family service center, with a trained counselor present to ensure Emily's emotional safety. Walker waited in the lobby while Emily spent an hour with Letha. When Emily emerged, she was thoughtful but not upset. How was it, sweetheart? Mommy cried a lot. She said she was sorry for scaring me and that she never wanted to hurt our family. She looks different, sadder, but maybe more honest. How do you feel about seeing her? Emily considered this carefully. I still love Mommy, but I don't want to live with her. She made me feel scared for too long. But maybe if she keeps getting better, we can be friends sometimes. Walker was amazed by his daughter's emotional maturity. At 7 years old, Emily had developed a sophisticated understanding of love, forgiveness, and personal boundaries that many adults never achieved. As they drove home, Emily asked, Daddy, will you ever get married again? Walker had been dreading this question. I don't know, sweetheart. Right now, I'm focused on taking care of you and Kyle. Someday, maybe I'll meet someone who loves our family and wants to be part of it, but only if she makes us all happier and safer. She'd have to be really special to be better than just us, Emily said with 7-year-old certainty. Yes, she would. Very special indeed. That night, after Emily was asleep and Kyle was finishing homework, Walker sat in his office reviewing the journey that had brought them to this point. The family photos on his desk told the story. Happy pictures from before the crisis, formal custody hearing photos where everyone looked strained and sad, and new pictures where the remaining family members looked peaceful and genuine. Walker had no regrets about the brutal efficiency with which he'd dismantled Letha and Adrian's plans. They'd threatened his children's well-being, and he'd responded with overwhelming force. The fact that both targets were now facing the consequences of their own choices rather than arbitrary punishment made the outcome morally justifiable. Adrian Potts was serving 8 years in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his future prospects eliminated. He would never again have the opportunity to prey on vulnerable families. Letha was slowly rebuilding her life, working as a receptionist while paying restitution to Adrian's victims and attending therapy. She might someday become the mother Emily and Kyle deserved, but that would require years of consistent effort and genuine change. Kyle was thriving academically and personally, having learned valuable lessons about integrity, loyalty, and the importance of protecting innocent people from predatory behavior. Emily was happy, safe, and no longer afraid in her own home. She'd learned that adults who truly love children put those children's needs first, and she'd never again tolerate being made to feel scared or unsafe. As for Walker himself, he'd learned that some wars are worth fighting regardless of the cost. When someone threatens your family, you respond with everything you have until the threat is eliminated. Walker Jackson had built his